Allen Lund Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
Scams are rapidly becoming a nearly daily feature of trucking, and it's getting harder to avoid them all the time. The latest one has the potential to ruin any trucking businesses that fall prey. I'll discuss some of those recent scams and more with Crystal Minardi of OOIDA's Permits and Licensing Department and Aaron Lynch and Joe Biggs of the Association's Business Services Department. What should you do when you get a ticket? And what are some of the reasons you might want to take that ticket to court? I'll get some advice on the topic from David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal. And finally, a new law in Washington state designed to guarantee truckers access to bathrooms at facilities they visit has taken effect. Scott Thompson gets the details on that and more from our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. We begin with news of a strike averted at UPS. The company and the Teamsters Union came to terms on a new 5-year deal shortly after resuming negotiations this morning. The union and its 340,000 UPS workers had threatened to strike starting next week. The Teamsters are calling the tentative agreement historic and overwhelmingly lucrative. It includes wage increases in air conditioning and delivery trucks. The starting pay for part-time workers will jump by nearly $5 to $21 per hour. The deal still needs to be ratified by union members. Voting begins next week and will run through August 22nd. Diesel prices are on the rise again. The Energy Information Administration says last week's national average was $3.90, a spike of nearly 10 cents compared to the week before. That's the biggest increase in more than a year. All 10 regions in the EIA survey recorded price jumps last week. ProMiles.com has the trend continuing this week. They had the national average at $3.87 on Tuesday morning. That's up nearly 6 cents compared to a week earlier. Prices went up in 9 of the 10 regions ProMiles tracks, the only exception being the New England area. The White House is making plans to keep Julie Su on as acting labor secretary, even if she doesn't gain Senate approval. NBC News reports that the Biden administration plans to use a little-known law to make it happen. In an email, a White House official said Su became acting secretary when former Secretary Marty Walsh stepped down, not under the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, and therefore can serve as acting secretary indefinitely. Su's nomination has hit a roadblock in the Senate after Senator Joe Manchin expressed opposition. Democrats don't have enough votes to confirm Su right now. Objections to her nomination range from her implementation of California's AB 5 law while serving as labor commissioner of the state to her management of unemployment benefits. There was an almost 12% drop in load volume last week, according to DAT. Landline Now's Ashley Blackford explains.
Robert Rouse with DAT says national benchmark broker to carrier spot rates for all 3 equipment types decreased last week.
For vans, the dry van line haul rate continues to loosen following last week's 3 cent per mile decrease. So at $1.66 per mile, excluding fuel, the national average is about 29 cents lower than in 2022 and only 10 cents per mile higher than in 2019. Line haul rates typically cool off post July 4th, and so far they've dropped about 7 cents per mile since Independence Day. In 2016, 2017, and 2019, they decreased about 9 cents per mile. So we're tracking exactly what we would expect for that time of year. For reefer line haul rates dropped by about 11 cents per mile since July 4th. That's following last week's 5 cents per mile decrease to a national average of $1.97 without fuel, $2.43 with fuel. And then lastly, flatbeds, after peaking in mid-May at about $2.20 per mile, flatbed line haul rates have dropped by about 16 cents in the past 10 weeks to a national average of $2.04 without fuel, following last week's 5 cent per mile decrease. So definitely something that we're watching as we're going into the later half of the year.
The number of trucks on the DAT load board last week decreased by 3.6%, but Rouse says the number of available trucks in the market continues to be strong. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. A coalition of 9 trucking groups is repeating their call to lawmakers to repeal the federal excise tax on the sale of heavy-duty trucks and trailers. The group, which includes the American Trucking Associations, the Truckload Carriers Association, and Diesel Technology Forum, sent a letter this week to Finance Committee leaders in the House and the Senate. They say a repeal of the federal excise tax would immediately reduce the cost of new, cleaner, and safer trucks by 12%. They also touted the environmental benefits, noting that eliminating the tax would make it easier for fleets to upgrade their equipment to cleaner models. The state of New Jersey is suing the federal government over congestion tolling. The target of the lawsuit is the Federal Highway Administration and a congestion pricing program that will charge drivers to enter Midtown Manhattan. The program's goal is to reduce traffic in New York City, with the money raised going toward mass transit projects. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy says the program will place an unfair financial and environmental burden on New Jersey residents. The governor added during a news conference that the proposal was rushed and is poorly designed. Multiple agencies in Ohio are investigating an officer who allowed his police dog to attack a truck driver who was surrendering with his hands raised earlier this month. Body cam footage from the incident was released this week. It happened on July 4th. The Ohio State Highway Patrol says they first tried to stop the semi because it was missing a mud flap and failed to stop for an inspection. A chase began. It came to an end near Circleville, about 40 miles south of Columbus on a state highway. The nearby Circleville Police Department was called in to help, including a canine police dog. Body cam footage shows the unarmed truck driver, 23-year-old Jadarius Rose, outside the truck with his hands raised. A trooper can be heard repeatedly yelling instructions to the canine handler, as heard here.
Do not release the dog with his hands up. Do not release the dog with his hands up. Don't.
But the officer does end up releasing the dog, which then attacks Rose.
Do not get the dog off of me. Get the dog off of me. Get the dog.
Rose was treated at a hospital for dog bites and charged with failure to comply. It's not clear why he refused to initially stop, but in audio recordings of a 911 call, Rose told emergency dispatchers that the officers pursuing him were trying to kill him and he didn't feel safe pulling over. The officer who released the police dog has since been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. In a statement, Nana Watson, president of the NAACP Columbus chapter, condemned the actions of the police, saying it saddened her that in 2023, quote, "We have officers who are unleashing dogs on a person who clearly had his hands in the air," adding that did not matter to the Circleville Police Department. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has removed 4 more ELDs from its list of registered devices. They include All Truckers ELD model number ARS, Golden ELD model number GRS, Prime LD model number PRS, and Secure ELD model number SRS. FMCSA says the revoked devices did not meet the minimum requirements outlined by federal regulations. Motor carriers and drivers who use the ELDs listed must stop using them and revert to paper logs or logging software to record hours of service data and replace the revoked ELD with a compliant one before September 23rd. And finally, a Nikola electric semi that caught fire in Arizona a month ago reignited over the weekend. ABC 15 News in Phoenix says they responded to the fire on Sunday afternoon, exactly 1 month after putting out the initial fire. Nikola believes the initial fire was a result of foul play, as they put it. The Phoenix Fire Department says the fire reignited due to another thermal runaway and ignition of the battery cells located in the vehicle. Firefighters had to use a deck gun, applying hundreds of gallons of water per minute and covering the cells burning at over 800 degrees. There were no injuries despite smoke from electrical vehicle fires being extremely toxic. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Support the OOIDA Mary Johnston Scholarship by donating to the fund. Send tax-deductible donations to OOIDA Foundation, Inc., 1 Northwest OOIDA Drive, Grain Valley, Missouri, 64029. Next, I'll discuss the latest scams targeting truckers with Crystal Minardi, Aaron Lynch, and Joe Biggs of OOIDA. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
You trust Prepass for more bypasses? Now let Prepass help with tolls. Prepass toll service means lower cost, one invoice for all tolls, and fewer violations. Created by truckers for truckers. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. truckers, I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
Landline Now, welcome back. Scams are rapidly becoming a nearly daily feature of the trucking industry, and it's getting harder all the time to avoid them. Here to discuss some recent scams along with several other topics are Crystal Minardi of OOIDA's Permits and Licensing Department and Aaron Lynch and Joe Biggs of the Association's Business Services Department. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you as always, Mark.
Crystal, let's start with you because this is something that's come up very, very recently. It's kind of the latest thing out there, and it involves people's commercial driver's licenses. Can you explain what's happening, basically?
Well, I mean, just like we had talked about, I think it was last week, FMCSA had put in a temporary adjustment when updating your MCS 150. That's the form to update your DOT number. When submitting a manual form, they're now requesting a copy of your driver's license to ensure that you are the owner of the DOT number. Since then, we've gotten reports that these scammers are now requesting a copy of your driver's license to take a load off of a load board, for example. And then what they're doing is taking that copy of the driver's license, updating your MCS 150 so that they can get in there, adjust the information, and now they've essentially hijacked your DOT.
So are there circumstances where you should provide your commercial driver's license info?
If you're dealing with a reputable broker, they are not going to ask you for a copy of your driver's license. It's important to note that, this isn't, I think you're going to start to see, obviously with scammers, they're going to start asking for these driver's license, but this isn't something that's common until now. Now that FMCSA has said we need a copy to, sort of calm the fraud and scam down. So if they're requesting it, that's a red flag. You need to look further into it.
Unless you're sure. And again, with the MCS 150, if you start that process of updating, then you're likely to see that request is likely to be legitimate.
Correct.
But only if you're the one who's initiated that process.
That is correct. But if you have a broker requesting a copy of it so you can take a load, do not send that broker a copy of your driver's license.
You mentioned that they can hijack their MCS 150. Talk a little bit about the possible consequences. What happens if someone does that? What can they do?
So what they're going to do is they're going to go in and they're going to update the phone number on your motor carrier details, update the email, change the amount of trucks, drivers, and then what they're going to do is they're going to book loads under your MC number, and then they'll double broker, and then you're left with a liability essentially. So you have a lot of people coming after you. When the broker's getting money or, quick pays or that sort of thing, it's a lot of, it's a nightmare for the carrier, if you will.
Okay. Is there any way to fix this once it happens if you do fall prey to it?
Well,
not really.
Not really. I mean, that's why we talked on the last show about, being vigilant with, checking your DOT every day or monthly at least, making sure that you are not a victim of this. And once it does happen, I mean, there are, I think Tom talked about different steps that you can take to make reports and that sort of thing. But it doesn't, it's once the damage is done, it's a lot to go through, and you may never recover, unfortunately.
Okay, so very, very definitely be vigilant about this and avoid if at all possible.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else people need to be aware of about this particular scam?
They just need to be very mindful of who they're working with. I can say that they can reach out to shippers and haul directly. It's very common for you to go to a load board, especially with some of these larger load boards. We have reached out to some of the larger load boards ourselves and requested that they put a warning on their sites. That if brokers are requesting copies of their CDLs, don't do it. If you have a situation like that arise, give us a call. We're happy to help discuss this with you or contact the shippers directly. Make sure that the load that you are, accepting is the actual shipper or broker that you're dealing with.
And go through the normal things like credit check and so on and so forth to make sure it's a legitimate broker.
Correct.
Check their bond and so on.
Correct.
Okay. Well, guys, let's go on to some other scams that are out there, and there's quite a few of them right now. Aaron and Joe, there's some that are coming now through text messages because apparently they weren't coming through enough different places. What kind of scams are coming through these text messages?
Most of the scams coming through text, they're not quite as nefarious as the changing the information, but they're still scams nonetheless. It's typically groups that have formed businesses with names that sound pretty official as far as the FMCSA is concerned, and they're messaging people. They started out mailing, then emailing, now text messaging to get you to update your DOT number, maybe your UCR, around that time when it's due. They don't check to see if it's updated. They just text you this information, hoping you'll respond and pay them to do it, even if it doesn't need to be done. It's, like I said, not as nefarious, but they're still trying to get money out of you to do something you can either do way cheaper yourself, if not free, or something that's already been done for you or you've already done yourself.
So basically, they're just after a fee for providing this service that you could perform for yourself for free.
Correct. And it's not that they don't, most of them don't actually do that service for you. I've seen that where they've updated it for them and whatnot, but it's one of those situations where they're charging ridiculous fees to get it done, $300, $400, $500 just to do a biennial update, which you can do yourself for free.
How do you tell a real nose from the fake? Because you mentioned a lot of these folks are using names that are very suspiciously close to sounding like part of the DOT, but they're not. How do you tell the real from the fake here?
Typically, the DOT, the Department of Transportation, is only going to mail you letters if they have something that you need to take care of. Text messages and even emails really aren't something they're going to do. And especially on the letters and the emails, if you look at the bottom, there many times you'll see that it'll say we are not affiliated with the Department of Transportation or FMCSA. And of course, if you have any concerns about it, you can always reach out to us, and we'd be more happy to look at it for you, go through it with you, try and figure out what's going on, or if you even need it done.
Okay. And folks, that phone number is 816-229-5791. Ask for business services. Again, 816-229-5791.
And I will also add to that, FMCSA will never ask you for money, ever. And a lot of these, that's the first thing out of the gate. They're going to ask you for astronomical amounts of money, so keep that in mind as well.
And they will not text you.
No.
Yeah,
that's not something that they do.
Do they email?
They do. If you have your own authority, they are, with this URS system, you do have to have a valid email. And when you're applying, you will select if you want to be contacted by email, mail, or both. That is, typical to select both. So you're getting contacted by them. But those emails are not going to be contacting you to do your biannual updates and that sort of thing. That's not what that's utilized for.
What is it utilized for?
Well, they're going to, for the letters that you, like when you're going through their protest period for getting your own authority and that sort of thing.
Okay. So again, just be aware, keep an eye on it, look for the telltale signs.
Right. And if you're not sure, call us. That's what we're here for.
Okay. Let's move on to another topic entirely here, something that's at least not about scams, and that is factoring. And guys, let's start with this. What is factoring? How does it work?
Well, Mark, factoring is basically the action of selling your business invoices to a factoring company for cash. And what it does is it provides you the immediate cash flow that you need to stay afloat, because brokers have a 30-day period that they run into their contracts to where they will not pay you. So that helps fill that void for that time period.
And they typically charge a percentage of that.
They do. They charge a percentage of that because they essentially play the middleman role. So you submit your invoices to the factoring company, and they pay you the cash up front into your bank account, and then they will collect on your behalf 30 to 90 days after the fact.
Now, this is where some people run into trouble, and that is when maybe they are not paid 30 or so days after the fact. What typically happens at that point?
At that point, it depends on what is in your contract and what factoring company you went with. A lot of times what we see here is that if a broker doesn't pay the factoring company at that specified time period, that factoring company will either hold your money over from loads that you're still being owed on for that previous week up to a certain amount for a guarantee, or they will take the money back out of your account to cover themselves, because that factoring company, it's important to understand that factoring company will never take a loss. They're not there to take the loss for you. They're just the middleman, so they're always going to get their money.
Well, and they're also not a collection service.
Correct.
They're just there basically to...
Yeah, I mean, they have other things that they do as well, right? Like online reporting, data storage. Some of them offer fuel advances or fuel discounts. They run credit checks, for you as well for brokers to hopefully cut down on some of these scams that we were talking about earlier, right? And so there's other things that they're beneficial, but usually they're most beneficial to the person that is just starting out in the business, that has maybe spent more money than what they thought they would on the authority, buying the new truck, the insurance premiums, things like that. So if you don't have the capital moving forward and the ability to wait 30 days to get paid, that's a lot of times where this factoring company comes into play.
What are some of the reasons that brokers are not paying these factoring companies? Because that's part of what feeds into this. I know that, for example, claims is a big area. Can you explain?
Yes, so claims on a load are a big proponent of why a broker wouldn't pay the factoring service. And so anytime that there's a discrepancy on the bills of lading, or something was written down as like discoloration to watermelon, or there was damage, or the load and count wasn't accurately represented in the actual delivery itself, there's all kinds of factors that play into that. And so that claim can honestly, they have up to, I think, 9 months, almost to a year to be able to file that claim. So that factoring company doesn't have the ability to take a loss for that for 9 months. And so they're going to go ahead and they're going to take that money back out of your account to at least cover for it until the claim has been decided on. And that's not an overnight process.
When some people get caught up on and they get enticed by non-recourse factoring, which they believe means if for whatever reason the broker doesn't pay, then they're good. They can go on their day without their money, or the factor can go on their day without the money. But most of those non-recourse agreements have stipulations that there's almost no way every single broker they're dealing with, or maybe even any broker they're dealing with, can hit. It could be the credit rating of the broker. It can be the amounts that are involved, just exactly what the claim is for. They make it almost impossible to actually have non-recourse factoring, and that's what people get hung up on, and that's something they need to watch out for.
Okay. Well, folks, we're out of time for these topics, but I want to thank you all very much for the information. It's very helpful.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Thank you as always.
I've been talking with Crystal Minardi of OOIDA's Permits and Licensing Department and Aaron Lynch and Joe Biggs of the Association's Business Services Department about principally some of the scams that are circulating right now. We'll be back in a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Loadboard Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Loadboard Pro.
What should you do when you get a ticket? And what are some of the reasons you might want to take that ticket to court? You're listening to Landline Now, and I'm your host, Mark Reddick. Welcome back to the program. Many truckers will face this situation at some point in their careers, and how you handle it can have an impact on everything going forward from that point in time. I called to get some advice on the topic from David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal. Well, first of all, what is the first step to take when you've been given a ticket? What is the first thing that you ought to do?
Okay, Mark, that's a really good question. So I would say that the first thing that you should really do when you get a ticket is read it. A lot of tickets have different instructions. They have different details on them, and those details really matter, especially for you as a driver. Your license is most likely going to be affected by this ticket. No one is going to be affected more than you are, and so it really benefits you the most to know exactly what you're facing, what you might be able to do about it, and how much time you have. All those pieces of information can usually be found on the ticket.
What are some of the reasons that you might want to take a ticket to court?
So the main reason would be if it is going to affect your driver's license record in a negative way. And not all tickets will do this. Some tickets won't be reported to your driver's license record. Some of them will be what we call point violations. Usually those violations are for non-moving things like parking or seatbelt or something like that. So those are less likely to affect your record. But moving violations, things like passing by a way station that's open or running a red light, speeding over the limit, being out in a passing lane as a driver and sitting there, all of those can reflect back onto your record, add up as points, and potentially put you in danger of a fine or even a suspension for a period of time.
Let's talk a little bit about preparation. If you decide to go to court, what papers or other materials should you have before you take that next step?
Something we always recommend to drivers is that they go and get a copy of their MVR, their motor vehicle record. That can be gotten from their DMV in their home state, either in person or usually online. Most DMVs have an option for you to do that. And the reason for that is that if you are going to convince a court, a judge or a prosecutor, that you should be given a break on a ticket, a good way to strengthen your argument is by showing that you have been a good driver up until this point. If you have a very clean record, you can present that and say, look, I am a clean driver. I am not dangerous, and this is a fluke or a one mistake. Will you please give me a break on this one? It's a pretty effective tool.
Okay. Should you have an attorney?
So it depends. I am in a position where I see a lot of drivers who unfortunately have some serious consequences as a result of tickets that may or may not be their fault, but what the court says goes onto their record and it ends up affecting their livelihood. It affects their families. I hate to see that. From my perspective, I would say an attorney is almost always the right way to go. Now, that's not always true. If I were in a position of being a driver, the first thing I would do would be to contact the court and kind of see where I stand, talk with the court, see if I can get a hold of the prosecutor's office on the phone, and just have a conversation, see if the court is willing to work with drivers that have a CDL, because not all courts are. Some of them have a really kind of brick wall policy against doing any kind of plea deals or reductions or even dismissals for CDL drivers. So I would call the court and see where they stand on things. And I would call them and ask what might happen with my ticket. Like I said, some tickets are not reported. And what that means is that the court will receive the ticket and work it as they normally would. They'll, ask you to pay a fine. They might convict you of something, or if you fight it, then they might, move it down to a different violation. Whatever happens in the court happens still. But then the court just stops at that point and doesn't report the ticket out to your home state's DMV so that it appears on your record. So that is an outcome that can happen, and that's something you can ask a court clerk. Hey, do you report this violation? A lot of violations that don't get reported, sort of across all states, are local ordinance violations. So something, if you go down a route that your GPS says is okay, but then an officer comes and pulls you over and says, hey, did you see that sign a mile back that said no trucks on this route? Like, I didn't see that. My GPS said it was fine. So that might be a local ordinance violation for going off of a truck route. This is one example. But a lot of those types of tickets that are you broke a law that was just for that one small particular place, those might not get reported out to your home state because they have no connecting violation for that. Your home state can't say, oh, yeah, you broke this law about this one town in this other state halfway across the country. How do we assign points for them? So the court doesn't even bother. Again, that's something that you can find out from the court.
I'm wondering if you can walk us through what it's like when you go to court. What should people expect in the courtroom if they decide to take a ticket to court? What's the kind of process there?
So it really depends, and that is because a traffic case is very unlike what you're used to seeing on TV with big, exciting, dramatic cases in court that have to do with big ticket civil items or even criminal charges that are pretty serious. A traffic case is usually held with just you and your attorney and the prosecutor and the judge. There's almost never a jury. As a matter of fact, if you have an option to go with a jury, you probably don't want to take that. It costs the court more money and makes the court less flexible when it comes to making you a deal to improve your record. So usually it's just 4 of you in the room, or maybe even just your attorney. If you're not present, your attorney represents you in front of the prosecutor and the judge, and it'll go through a couple of hearings before a trial. And usually attorneys who are savvy about these kind of things want to do is they want to close up a case before it goes to trial. Again, that's something that they are aware costs the court more money and is a less sure thing than working out a deal with the prosecutor in these hearings. Again, which are just usually the attorney and the prosecutor and the judge sitting down and having a meeting.
What sort of questions should you be asking when you go to court? Are there particular questions that are important to clarify between you and the attorney before you walk into that courtroom?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So one thing, if you have an attorney, that you will want to talk with your attorney about is what is his goal, and what things does he or she know about the court that would be kind of pushing towards the outcome that the attorney wants to get for you. So often when attorneys are going to the court, they are familiar with the court. They're familiar with the people who work there. Those people are familiar with them. They have a working relationship, and they're usually familiar with the court's internal policies and procedures. Why that's important is that every court operates slightly differently, and what works in one court may not work in another. The justice system is extremely complex, and there's so much nuance that that's another reason to hire an attorney, especially if it's something that might heavily impact your record. You want to put that in the hands of an expert. So you might think, okay, well, I have this camera footage, and I have my MVR, and I have my statement, and if I bring all that in, and I can present my case to the judge, and cross-examine the officer, or my attorney can do something like that, and we'll all get it done, and the gavel will come down in my favor. Almost never happens that way. Usually the attorney comes in, says, hey, can we work this deal out? You know me, I know you. Hey, this guy isn't too bad. Look at his MVR. And based on the nature of the attorney's relationship and his familiarity with the court is usually what gets you a better deal than just a black and white, your day in court, so to speak. And I know that runs very counterintuitive to our sense of American justice and our sense of right and wrong and the way that it should be and the way that we understand it to be by looking at TV and things that we've heard. But what I found, again, from perspective, looking at a lot of different traffic cases, helping a lot of drivers, is that putting it in the hands of a local expert attorney who has your best interest in mind and who knows the court very well, and just kind of letting him do his thing or her do her thing. However that happens to shake out, is almost always a better outcome than coming in swinging and thinking that you and your like evidence and your statement and everything will win the day.
I wonder if you can talk a little bit about anti-masking policies, what they are and how they can affect things like this.
So anti-masking policies they don't have anything to do with COVID. They are from back in, I think 2011, possibly 2012. I'm sorry, the date I'm not really sure on. But at some point, the federal government instituted a policy, a rule, that courts were not allowed to hide or mask the bad driving record of a bad driver. That's basically what the DOT at the federal level wants to do. They want to reduce the amount of crashes on the road. They want to reduce the amount of fatalities. That is their only goal. And so to do that, they want bad drivers who are getting violations, who are getting tickets, they want them off the road. They want those to work. They want them to stick on your record and for you to not be able to drive if you're a bad driver. Unfortunately, what that has done is it has given courts who don't really want to go through the trouble of working out a plea deal with a driver, because it's more work for the court to do that than it is to just accept the driver's fine and write down a guilty plea. It's given those courts an excuse to lean away from drivers and to adopt this anti-masking policy and say, okay, well, we're preventing bad drivers from being on the road. But what that really means is they are kind of stepping out of the way of due process. You should be guilty until proven innocent, or I'm sorry, innocent until proven guilty.
A little bit the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. You'd hope it's that way. And you should have your day in court, and you should, like any other driver, have the ability to make a reasonable plea deal with the court. All other drivers get this, but again, these courts in different areas of the country, sometimes it's a specific court for a specific reason. Sometimes it's a whole region or a whole state will kind of adopt this blanket policy against CDL holders. When that's in effect, it really limits your options. And you can decide for yourself whether or not it's worth it to try to push forward and fight all the way to a trial and hope that you get a resolution in your favor against all the odds. Or it also gives you the option to back out and say, okay, like if it's not worth it to throw all of my time and my money at a court that's never going to give me justice of any kind, then if I pay my fine, then that's a smaller loss to take. Anyway, knowledge in all cases is helpful to the driver.
Okay, well, that's all the time we've got for this topic, but thank you very much for all the information.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
I've been talking with David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal, a legal services provider for the trucking industry, about what to do when you get a ticket. You can learn more by calling CDL Legal at 913-738-4836 or by going to their website, cdllegal.com. Again, that phone number is 913-738-4836, and the website is cdllegal.com. And you can find all that information on our website, landlinenow.com. Just click on the photo or headline in the red box. Again, that's at landlinenow.com. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us through a short commercial break. I'm Mark Redd again. This is Landline Now.
Can't miss accuracy, weigh your truck on a CAT scale.
When you weigh on a CAT scale, you get a no excuses guarantee. You can now save time weighing by using your smartphone. Find out more at weightmytruck.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Guaranteed bathroom access in one state, new move-over laws in others. Welcome back to Landline Now and our weekly state legislative update. We'll break down those stories right now with the help of Keith Goebel, our state legislative expert from Landline Magazine. Keith, how you doing?
Scott, doing all right. How you doing?
Doing just fine. So we're going to start by putting 49 states on notice right now because Washington State has now officially raised the bar when it comes to bathroom access for truckers. The law we've been talking about for, months now, is finally in effect. A quick refresher, Keith, for the class who may not have been paying attention as much as we have.
Well, we're gonna give them credit for paying attention, but they may not remember the dates of when this actual rule that's been in pursuit is going to take effect, which is why we're talking about it again. Is that it's happened? It is now a done deal. It is in effect in the state of Washington. Their pursuit of requiring shippers and consignees to make restrooms available for truck drivers. Folks will probably remember a year ago, the Washington State, the legislature acted to put in place protections for those folks, drayage truckers and going into terminals, and they did that. They took that first step, which was huge, which again is something that no other state has done. But this year, going back, addressing the issue, making it even applying to all truck drivers now. So as of July 23rd, that is new now. That is a done deal. That is in effect in the state of Washington.
And this, again, not a complete overhaul because, for the most part, these are restrooms that already exist. These are shippers and consignees that already have these restrooms in place. Essentially, now they just have to make sure that they let truck drivers who are doing business with them use those restrooms, which, again, is not a huge leap here. Very common sense. And we would hope that other states take notice. And there is a federal bill right now in the U.S. House that would do something similar. So, again, this is very common sense stuff here. And there will be penalties, though, in Washington State for companies that don't play by these rules, right?
Yeah, and as you know, as Executive Vice President here at OOIDA, Louis Pugh had pointed out, it's a basic need. I think that was one of the issues that initially was brought up back in early 2022 when the Washington State Legislature started to address this. Is that seriously? This needs to be in statute. They need to do this because this isn't something that it was an education process for lawmakers, and obviously that's going to continue around the country, and hopefully that it'll continue around the country, educating elected officials on the need to address the issue, but. Yes, one thing that was brought up in the Washington Trucking Association specifically addressed this point whenever the legislature was discussing this year's bill was as far as fines, penalties, that's not the focus. The focus is to just put in place rules and make sure that folks are following them. And a good point about that is, the Washington State Department of Health, they're responsible for enforcement. They can send out fines of $125 when a violation occurs. But that isn't the first step. The first step is Washington State's Department of Health being notified of an issue at a location. And obviously by truck drivers, most likely are going to be the ones that are going to notify that department. And then the department sending out a notice of correction to the affected facility that they need to address it. And they need to make sure that there aren't any problems, that they're providing access, that they provide to customers and employees, that they also provide access for truck drivers. So that is the first point of this, is that a notice of correction would be sent, and after that, if the problem continues, that they would then face that $125 fine per violation.
Yeah, kudos once again to Washington State for getting this done. And again, I'll be curious to see if other states take notice of this and realize that this is an issue that needs to be resolved. And we'll see if they take action on that front. Let's move on to move over laws now. We've got a few more states with new rules in place or rules that are about to take effect. This appears to be a growing trend, Keith. How many states? I think we're up to double digits now in terms of new states putting new move over laws into effect this year, right?
Yeah, I'll start with, we can only hope that the pursuit that we've seen across the country here in the last 12 to 24 months will be similar in scope to what we see with changes to or assurances for access to bathroom facilities for truck drivers, because it is a topic that has just blown up, for lack of a better term, here throughout the state. Of course, for I don't want to say decades, but about decades, all states have move over rules. The focus, as you would expect, through all those years has been for, protecting emergency vehicles, whether it's, police, fire, emergency, tow trucks. I mean, they've been expanded through the years to apply to other types of service vehicles. But by and large, it does not apply to other types of road users like trucks, which require some space if they're parked along the side of the road, if they're doing some service on the side of the road, whatever the case might be. But yeah, I mean, this has been huge to see so many states acting so quickly. Once the ball kind of started to get rolling here in recent years. And again,
I think, as you point out in your piece on landline.media, 10 additional states have adopted move-over rules. This year alone, we're up to 19 states, as you counted them here. The three newest ones, again, putting new laws into effect, or already into effect, are North Dakota, Colorado, and Maine. Let's go real quick through these here in terms of what specifically they're doing, or maybe they're all the same here. But starting with North Dakota, what does the new law say there?
Yeah, expanding it as of August 1st. Drivers, if they're approaching a vehicle that has their flashing, if their hazard signals on, as long as they're outside the limits of a city, an approaching vehicle is required to move over a lane. If they can't move over, they're required to slow down.
In Colorado, looks like a similar thing there. They're expanding the existing move-over rule, also taking effect, I believe, in August as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for that one, if someone fails to move over and make room for any stationary vehicle that's along the side of the road and they have their hazard signal on, anybody who's found to be in violation of that rule would face not only a fine, but the possibility of jail time, 10 days in jail. So a little bit more strict there in the state of Colorado.
$150 fine there in Colorado, it looks like, or at least it's a minimum fine of $150. So quite a steep penalty there. And then finally, real quick, Maine also putting changes into effect.
Yeah, what they've done is they've expanded on their move-over rule to apply that same protection for any disabled vehicle that's in the breakdown lane. Now, it would have to be, if there's a vehicle that's in a breakdown lane, for that protection to apply, they would have to have their hazard lights on, displayed. And there are some other little caveats that they put in there that they would like to see drivers in that situation that are parked along the side of the road that they also do. But basically it is, if you've got your hazard lights on there in the state of Maine, this protection would apply to you there in the state of Maine as of the 1st of September. In September, $275 fine at least if you fail to make way for or make room for those vehicles.
Yeah, that's steep. Yeah, we'll see what the education process looks like in these states that are expanding these rules, because I'm sure that will be a process in and of itself. Keith, You educate us every time you come by, and we appreciate it. We'll see you again soon.
Well, thanks for having me.
You can check out Keith's work at landline.media, where you can find updates on all 50 states any time of day. And speaking of that, that's our time with you today. Thanks for listening. We're back tomorrow with another show, and we hope to see you then. Take care.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
My kids.
chrome,
And
I am
I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us.
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.